Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Kirchner, and this is a podcast about leadership. And on this podcast, we talk about the skills and mindsets required to become not just a regular old leader, but an excellent leader. And today we're taking on a very important topic, the climb from startup to scale up, and ultimately the leap to the public markets, the IPO. We always typically hear about the financial side of an IPO, the bell ringing, the stock price, the capital raise, the big party, the confetti. What we rarely talk about is the human toll and the leadership culture required to start a company is often very different from the culture required to lead a public organization. And so to help us navigate this, we have two incredible heavy hitters with us today. First, I'm going to go with, we got to get a drum roll. I'm doing drum roll. Gary Survis. So Gary is an operating partner at Insight Partners, which is one of the world's largest venture capital and private equity firms. So Gary does not watch from the sidelines. Gary's deep in the trenches with his portfolio companies, and he's helping them navigate the messy, complex journey of what we'll call scaling up. And he's bringing the unique perspective of seeing this play out across not just like one or two, but hundreds of organizations, knowing exactly where the plot twists are. And so it's incredible to have you on the show today, Gary. Thank you so much for joining from what looks like New York City in the background.
Indeed it is. Thank you, Jonathan. Super excited to talk about one of my favorite topics.
Awesome. Okay, and then joining Gary, as though it wouldn't be enough, we have Katherine Williamson. It's weird saying Katherine because Kat, I know you for years, and Kat is currently the VP of Talent Development at Gong. Kat's previously held roles at HashiCorp, Pinterest, and other high-growth tech firms. She's an expert practitioner who has lived through the IPO transition from the inside and recently actually collaborated with us. Thank you so much, Kat, for the collaboration and partnership on the white paper that we wrote titled The IPO Evolution, which looks specifically at how talent and culture needs to mature in order to survive public scrutiny. Kat knows exactly what it takes to get a leadership bench ready for the big leagues. So Gary, Kat, welcome to the show. I'm pumped. I'm gonna field the first question to Gary. So Gary, you work with so many companies at that critical scale up phase. Is there a specific like inflection point or moment, a specific kind of failure where a founder realizes like, oh no, like all that fun, dopaminergic, scrappy chaos that got me here is now actually like hurting us. It's getting in our way.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question because as Kat well knows, there is points at which we have discussions just about talent in general at these businesses that say this person in this role probably is not the person that's going to get you to the next level. They may be great at this range, not so much to this next leg of the journey. And that goes throughout all the growth, not just IPO. And I think, as companies are working through their scale-up journey and they're trying to figure out what they need to continue to scale, what happens typically, unfortunately, is the KPIs start to be telling a different story. And that doesn't mean the company has lost product market fit. It doesn't mean that the business is not a good business, but we start to see some degradation in the core KPIs. Those KPIs can be the rate at which ARR is changing. So we were growing at, a doubling every year, and now that's kind of coming down as the rate of change is going. And that may be a law of numbers, by the way. It's not just simply that. We might see it in little bits of retention issues, which tells you that maybe your onboarding isn't great. Maybe you have telemetry data that tells you your engineering team is working super hard, but people aren't using all the new features that are being introduced into your product. And so these are just examples across any of the functional areas which give you leading indicators that something within the organization has changed. And the solution is not always simple. It's not necessarily, I need a new person, or may not mean that you need to change how you've done things. And you need someone in a senior role who is not just managing for today, but managing for what's next.
That's really interesting. So I can actually, being a founder and CEO of two organizations, Air Analytics and Air Consulting, Air Analytics being 3 years old. So it's really still kind of a baby. Air Consulting being much more mature, but like I know how amazing it feels to move fast, to like out innovate. It's pleasureful. It's actually like incredibly gratifying to lead through innovation, and to always doing new things. And I remember the first time somebody was trying to explain to me, I didn't get my MBA, so no MBA here, no formal training, psychologist, tried to start a company and barely made it, and now here I am, right? When somebody was trying to explain to me what a KPI it was, I was like, that is like the most like de-energizing like concept. I mean, you're gonna just sit and like measure the same thing, like every month, and then like we're gonna look at a report or a dashboard on a quarterly basis, and that's what success or failure is. It's not like what we innovated, or did we have fun, or did we move fast and break things. So it was so de-energizing. I'm curious, from both of you, like Kat, you being sort of operating internally in an organization and helping like leaders at scale develop, with some major implications to culture, and Gary, you looking at investment choices and helping founder CEOs. Like, let's unpack that concept a little bit. Like, how the founders, let's start with this. The founders become sort of obsessed with just like the allure of chasing the shiny object, moving fast and breaking things, and sort of resist this like slowing down and attending to the boring stuff like KPIs and OKRs.
I can start, but I'm sure Gary's got tons to contribute as well. I think so, and I think, at least sort of in some of my experiences, I think it's less about like the excitement, but more about the perception of slowing down to do these things. And I think sort of sometimes it's been my job to say, we might need to slow down initially, but in order to scale and in order to, ramp fast, or like get after some of the things that you want to do, which might be more exciting for you, in terms of innovation and growth, we need to set these foundations so that we don't have to keep reiterating things or duplicating work across the system, because this person built something, we haven't shared it centrally, we don't have a central ownership. Maybe they leave the company or they get bored of it and it goes away, and somebody else has built the same thing over here and someone else has built the same. So there's like a place here which is like sometimes you need to kind of slow down and get your foundations in order to get back to doing some of the stuff that you love doing. Like once this stuff runs well, then, go for it, go innovate, be excited about those things.
It makes a ton of sense, but like, do you ever like meet up with resistance when you're saying to a founder or to a leadership team, like, hey, we need to slow down and get our processes right, or we need to do some interviews and scope out the right solution here? Like, does that feel like bureaucracy, or like we're like slowing ourselves down?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's partly our job, is to kind of paint the picture of the future, and really get to why this is important, particularly if it's a topic that the CEO found. I've worked in tech a lot, so a lot of tech CEOs might not have been able to see or had experiences where HR ran this way, operations ran this way. They've seen RevOps working at scale. Like, I think sometimes it's our job to, to educate in that if you slow down and create this stuff, it doesn't have to seriously impact your culture. Your culture can still be exciting and innovative and trying new things. And there is some benefit to getting some of these pieces in place.
I think it's a mistake to paint the entrepreneur with a single brush stroke. And I think that you're going to get, I talk about 4 archetypes of the entrepreneur, and because they are so different, that they will respond to these things quite differently. So archetype number 1, especially in my business, is the technical founder. And so the technical founder may come from an engineering background, may come from just much more of the product focus. The second one is going to be the go-to-market founder. And this is a founder that may have come up more through sales and found a technical co-partner, but they're leading, and their focus is go-to-market and selling. The third is the finance, someone who may have been a CFO or may just know the finances of growing businesses and how to do acquisitions and figure out how to integrate them and how to manage all of the numbers. And then the last one is sort of, and by the way, this may not be all MECE, you may see overlaps of entities, is what I'll just simply call the visionary. And the visionary is that person that is thinking out to the solutions and is really just incredible at creatively solving for problems. And you may have a single one of these or some melange of them, and they're going to respond to the scaling challenge differently. They're going to look for different things, and they're going to bring different skills to it as well.
I love that. So I imagine there's not one, silver bullet, like there's not one archetype that's better than the others. Like each one, has its own, pluses and trade-offs. And I really do appreciate that. It's not like every, founder, CEO, or entrepreneur is just chasing squirrels, right? That product person may actually need to chase more squirrels, right? They might be like 2 heads down, focused on their product and not looking out enough and exercising like creativity or visionary thinking. But so there's like these like strengths and trade-offs probably to each archetype. So independent of the archetype or the melange of the mix, Gary, I'm just curious, like you've probably had a conversation or two with a founder, that goes along the lines of like, what got you here is not going to get you there. Can you help us understand, like, what does that look like? And maybe if you had a conversation, you don't have to say the name or company or anything like that, but like, what does that conversation look like? And how, and have you seen founders take that feedback and run with it, and or conversely, like they just can't do it, they can't make it happen?
So when you get to the point of having a conversation with a founder about their role or what their team looks like, or how their scaling is going, typically they're in pain. And they're in pain. They are expressing their pain. It could be that they're working crazy hours. It could be that they're having a hard time delivering on key initiatives. Like, they're in pain. And so the discussion with a CEO that in some cases it's them, they are not the right person to take it to the next level. In other cases, it could be their co-founder who was incredible in product, but now you need a different kind of product organization or any of these combinations. And so you need to be in a place of, first and foremost, getting to the joint recognition that indeed there is an issue. Indeed, we've isolated where the issue is. And we have several options of how we could address this. You want to empower the CEO. And in most cases, even if the CEO is the issue, they know they're the issue. There are very few who are not self-aware to know where their challenges are. And so I think that, you can make it into this beautiful drama, but it doesn't really have to be a drama. And it doesn't mean that the things that got you here won't get you here in the future. That discussion doesn't need to be a game ender. It can be the beginning of that next level of collaboration with that founder, which can be equally as beneficial. And I'll say one last thing, which is, a long time ago, and I'm sure, Jonathan, you say this with some frequency, I worked with a coach and the key focus of that coach was getting me to identify my highest and best use. And if you can focus on highest and best use of an individual, then it's a very different discussion, because now you're saying, look at all the amazing things you bring. Remember, I told you the 4 archetypes. Maybe they've been forced to be all 4 of them, and they really should just be one of them. And that may be just a load taken off their shoulders.
So in many ways, these aren't just, these aren't just difficult conversations. These are coaching conversations, Gary, that you're having with the founder.
The board should be a coach. If you're going to use a board in the best possible way, the best possible way is not to use your decks to march them through all the slides and show them the performance that you could have emailed them. And if they're doing their job, they're reading. What you want to use the board is as a coach, as an advisor, as having more data points than you do to be able to give you recommendations.
I love it. I love orienting to a board is scary. I've been just, again, talking from, the shoes of a founder. It's like an intimidating thing to have a board and to be coming in and reporting to the board. But that shift in mindset and orienting to the board as sort of
you got to move beyond it being a report card, and move it to being everyone has the same goal to make this business successful. Let's all get together and have that discussion. And I'm going to be super transparent about where things are going well and where they're not. That's where many founders go awry, is they try to couch what they're saying and put it in a language there, versus taking ownership, saying, I tried this thing, it didn't work. Here's where I think the next direction is.
So that transparency, that candor, and us all, we're all on the same team here. This isn't just like a quarterly report card in front of a bunch of people where I need to, put spin on every message and slide. This is for us to come together to move the needle forward together. That's actually really valuable for the founders listening to this podcast, but also I think for board members as well, because I think board members sometimes do come to these meetings approaching it like a scorecard, report card activity. So I really appreciate that. Kat, of course, I read the white paper that you contributed so heavily to before this podcast to freshen up. I was shocked by this statistic that basically 60% of founders are no longer CEO by the time of IPO. I mean, I guess I'm just curious, for all the founders listening and those who are fascinated with, scale up ecosystems, like what's the shift in mindset that you've seen that is needed by the founder in order to be part of like that 40% that are, surviving?
Yeah. I think, and I think we were talking about this before. It's really quite a different job. I think it is that shift from, um, I think we say it in the white paper, from sort of chaos to organization, and maybe from sort of short-term mindset to more of a sort of structured, longer-term focus. I think that's really the big shift, which can feel honestly like a completely new job sometimes. And I think that um, that is sort of the risk, and there's lots of different pieces to it. But to Gary's point, like, if there was things that you loved doing, you loved being, if you're maybe the engineering archetype, like you love being in there, solving the problem, sitting with teams, actually doing the work. And now suddenly your role is much more numbers and reporting out and being, questions and possibly judged in a way, on your success in a way that you haven't experienced, in the times that you were really enjoying work. It can be sort of a lonely job, and suddenly you're not doing any of the cool stuff you wanted to do. And so sort of, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when I work with a founder CEO that IPO'd, and like one of the biggest like disenchanting surprises was, all of a sudden you've got to now like report on a quarterly basis to the public, and one penny off, or even now, with the pressure that in the markets, like if you just meet expectations, or maybe you're like exceeding expectations but not exceeding enough, or your forward guidance wasn't strong enough, that it could just like send you back 20% like that. And then all of a sudden everybody's like short-term focused, and then it, you get to the next quarter, maybe you crushed it, you tell a better narrative, the stock goes up, but then the next quarter down, and the cycle and the volatility of this can create this like very like short-term thinking. And now all of a sudden, like this expansive, especially for the visionary archetype, I imagine this would be like particularly hard for. A lot of that spark gets diminished. And I'm just curious, from both of you, like how do we mitigate, that risk of becoming, as maybe like Jeff Bezos and the Amazonians might say, becoming like a day two company, right? How do we mitigate the risk of becoming a day two company where that initial vibe and that energy is diminished?
Well, so I'm not sure the goal is to preserve the vibe. And what I mean by that is the concept of a company pre-IPO and a company post-IPO cannot, by its very nature, be the same thing. Now, you and I can talk about culture and preserving core tenets of our culture, but you literally, if you're a strong leader of a company that IPOs, you need to be the kind of leader that says, we were an amazing startup. We had a journey, we grew, we created, and our job isn't over. We are ready to move to our next level of growth, our next arc. And it won't be the same as our previous arc, but it can be just as rewarding, but in different ways. And that message to your employee base, because one of the things that's really hard for companies is actually retaining those employees post IPO. Kat knows this more so than I do. And that, you need to, and it's not simply money now, because some of them may have done incredibly well in a IPO. And now you need to reinvigorate the organization with new incentives and new excitement that was not what people were there originally. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's sort of my message, that there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and spot on. And what I'd add is, like, I think sometimes where things lag, or sometimes where you can get this kind of disrupted vibe, or maybe even culture, is when you have a set of leaders or a CEO founder or somebody who, like, won't make that shift. Says, no, we have to keep everything exactly as it was when we're a private company. But also, that's not the reality everybody's living in. And so employees get this weird mix of, no, we're still the same. We're still, cool and innovative. But what they're seeing in reality is something that looks and feels different. So you have this kind of push and pull moment. And I think that's one of the mistakes as at least you sort of see out there around, the 60%, is maybe the not recognizing and making that shift when they need to. And then, like Gary just said, reinvigorating towards it. Success is a huge motivator. Sometimes the success looks different in a startup than it might do in a scaling public company. But success is success. And so how do you start talking about the public company success in a way that's just as invigorating as maybe it was in the past?
And I would say, like, it's really interesting. People talk about IPOs being milestones. Now, a milestone, just to keep everyone on using our words correctly, is not an endpoint. It's a point on the journey. And so when you think about the milestone of IPO, hell, we're just getting started. And so I think it's really important for folks to think about this in the journey that this organization is on. And while this is an important milestone, it is certainly not the end point.
That's really important. I'm wondering, going back to a point you made, Gary, which I found to be like, personally resonant. Like, we're not solving for vibe. So many founders can get sort of caught in a trap where they're solving for vibe, and they're sort of like clinging to that kind of like founder energy. And I'm just curious, like, can that be a derailer? Is in some ways, have you seen this, like where founders are doing that in some way to resist the natural maturation to the next level? Could it be some kind of like unconscious change resistance, and from actually growing up, right? Like, I don't want to grow up. It's scary to be an adult. It's scary to be, with the big boys. Like, I want to go back to the playground. I'm just curious, I'm playing with this idea.
Yeah, no. There are plenty of founders who find themselves in the predicament that they solved a really important problem at one point, and the world is changing super quickly, and the solution to that problem is not what they came up with, or the market their product is targeted to is no longer the right market. And in so doing this, there's this massive amount of, like, I was giving a talk last week, and I was talking about AI transformation, and I said transformation used to be a project. Like it had a beginning and end. We're going to do Project Opus, and Project Opus is going to come from here to here. And when all of a sudden magically we'll be in the cloud, or magically, we'll be doing this with AI and the world we're in constant transformation. And so those founders who find it hard to create the culture of reinvention and constantly pushing the boundaries for themselves personally, as well as for their teams, are going to struggle. And this has nothing to do with IPO. This is just leadership in general and what it's going to take to be successful in a world where the idea that we're transforming our business is never done.
Right. It's not a transformation where we start here and end here, and then we're done, and now we're there. And maybe there's another transformation a few years later. We're in constant and continuous change. So what I'm hearing from you is that, right, again, put IPO, scale up, startup, all that aside, like table stakes to be a leader today is, like you said, Gary, to be in creating a culture of constant reinvention, which is that's hard.
If you're not disrupting yourself, there are many little AI native companies and competitors, and the folks that used to not be competitors say, what the hell, this looks like a juicy market, I'm going to go into this market. Like, we're in a hyper competitive world. And so if you are not like thinking of it in this world, and I'm not picking on Gong in any way, I'm just saying Gong did this one great little thing. It recorded calls. Wasn't that amazing? Well, if that's the only thing it continued to do today, no one would care. And so as you sort of think about like just what is going on in a regular cadence of business today, the great leader is the leader that is paranoid. Paranoia is actually a powerful tool for a leader. Like, you need to see all this risk, and you need to see all this change, and you need to understand like the world is changing and I'm not sure where it's going, and I'm okay with that. And I know how to lead through that. And so I think that, what you're left with today is a very different kind of operating world that every leader of every business is going to need to, up their skills to be successful. Even if they've had successful exits before, whatever they did there, probably not going to work now. And so you got to get to that level.
That makes me think about, Kat, you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, you've led the leadership development and talent development functions in numerous startup to scale up organizations. And, in that capacity, like, you've got to like decide, like, at this level, we're going to focus on these attributes and competencies. And in this level, we're going to focus on these leadership skills. And at this level of our emerging leader, we're going to work on these skills. It's like it's like a jigsaw puzzle specific to the context of being, in motion from startup to scale up. And then, of course, specific to the organization, whether it's HashiCorp, Pinterest, Gong, whatever it is, right? I'm just curious from, I got two questions. Like, one, help me understand how do you get this accepted into the system, into a system that's always like working harder than like their actual capacity, that's always under tons of pressure. How do you get people to like slow down to basically learn leadership skills? Like, I'm wondering, you probably get a lot of resistance. Like, no, like, we don't have time for that. Like, we don't have budget for that. We're putting that into, our marketing budget. Like, the people figure it out. Give them this book. So I'm just curious, like, how you get buy-in at the broadest level of a startup to scale up. And then my second question, really, to both of you, just like thinking about the skills we need right now in this point in time. So, like, if we had a magic wand and can create like the ultimate leadership development experience for a pre-IPO or just recently post-IPO organization in the year 2026, like what would that look like? But let's go to the first question first. Just like table stakes, how do you get adoption of leadership development and that investment of time and budget in an organization that's moving at like 120 miles an hour?
Yeah. I think as the world's changing, our development models need to change as well. I think in the past, it was okay to grab a bunch of leaders and take them out of the business for a week and, take them on a trek and learn team development skills and things like this. And very common set of skills that were going to lead to success as a leader. I think that is all kind of out the window now. I think really, really good leadership development is when you can sit alongside a leader for a period of time and really understand what are they doing in their business, what are their business challenges, how is their team around them operating, what are some of the struggles that they have with their particular business. And then being able to sort of offer up those little bits of, I call it in the flow of work kind of moments or practice or support that helps them get their job done. And that's really where I think leadership development is going, is around getting much closer to the business and to the leaders that we're there to help develop, understand where the business is going, like really put a business lens on, and then create just little moments of support, almost like sort of sitting with your coach to help them get the job done that they've got in front of them. But at the same time, keeping an eye on the future, which is, okay, you've got a problem today. Let's practice a new skill. How does that feel? What does that look like? What's some feedback? And then when that challenge comes up again, let's practice that skill again, building over time, rather than thinking there's sort of a silver bullet. It's not that way.
So it's not about carving out the 3 days and going off site to the mountains or something like that. Does that work?
I think it depends on the challenge that the leader or the leadership team is facing. I'm not saying that sometimes it's necessary to take a group of leaders, maybe a leadership team, out of the business for a second so they can all figure out, how do I work together? Maybe they have a set of conflict that is starting to get in the way of their decision making. Okay, so it's okay to say, time out. Let's step away here for a second. Let's figure out why we keep running into conflict here as an executive team, how that's slowing down our decision making, and what impact is that having on the business, and how do we start to get past this so that this conflict isn't slowing us down anymore. And so if that's the problem, I might say, those in the moments, like little hints and tips might not get them over this hurdle. You might need to pull them out and say, hey, we need to really fix this, and then get them back in. But that's you being very close to the business and starting to understand the root cause of how some of this is happening. So in that instance, you might come in for an hour, see a meeting, understand decision-making is the problem, and then create an operating process for them to start decision-making. But if the conflict is actually the problem there, no operating model in the world is going to help, because there's, contrarians and things like this in the group that are disrupting decision-making. But that's about getting close and then finding the solution that meets the need.
And I would add, Kat, on that piece there. I think you make some really important points here. It really depends on the problem and what is the best tactic to have progress. So I guess because I'm so over rotated to AI today, that I believe very strongly that we need to work harder to have the human to human pieces, which I think actually can be more impactful. And so as you look at your tool belt of ways that you can drive change and impact on management, teams, on leaders, some of it can be done async and could be training that you do online. But that has limits. I think if you do it on-prem, awesome, maybe that you take some time on-prem and do it. But when you're on-prem, you sort of have all the business pressure and the meetings and people knocking on the door and all of those pieces. And so you may need to get to the mountains just because the problem demands dedicated time. It can't be just your sort of side hustle, so to speak. It needs to really have a dedicated way to solve for that leadership issue. So again, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but I also don't want us to take a single point of view because the problems are just so different. As Kat was indicating, it really depends.
I love that. I love the concept of tool belt and having like multiple, sort of options and tools, depending on the problem we're trying to solve for. And one of those being the mountains, but others being, bite-sized learning and the flow of work. Fantastic. I mean, maybe we could just come back to this topic of leadership in our current times. We're getting towards the end of the year, about to start a new year, 2026. We're all experiencing the incredible disruptive power, which presents both an opportunity and perhaps challenges at the same time concurrently, with regard to AI and the massive force of innovation that brings. What are the leadership skills that leaders need to be developing and learning the same as they were 10 years ago, or do we need to be focused on some distinctive skills or attributes right now to be successful? Gary, you mentioned we got to be a little more paranoid. Should we be taking a paranoia 101 class? And I'm just being cheeky with you, but curious, I don't know, what does a leader need to do right now to be successful, to lead effectively?
I don't think it's ever been harder to be a leader of a business than it is today. I mentioned about the transformation, the constant transformation. Managing that is incredibly challenging. And I think, when you look at the skill sets that we have always valued, whether it be communication skills, or maybe it's the capacity to know how to navigate an organization, or maybe it's the skill of truly creating leadership and goals and a endpoint. None of those have changed. I think what people misunderstand about AI today is they think that it's a technology challenge, when in reality it's a change management challenge. So all the things that you've leveraged in the past to manage change need to be in the leader's tool belt again. You need to be able to have the right kind of training, and you need to create the right kinds of incentives, and you need to understand that the organization is probably going to lose some people because there's not the right fit. And these are not, I'm not minimizing these in any way to say that these are easy choices or that these are decisions that leaders take lightly. But in a world that is accelerating in the pace of change, this is not the time to just put yourself on the side and say, I'm going to wait and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to see how things work. Because you may wake up and your market's gone, your customers are gone, because someone moved quicker, more decisively, created the right kind of goals. And you've heard the, move quick and break things thing. That reality has never been more important, because your customers are under a different set of pressure. They are getting have you adopted AI yet? Or where's my ROI from my AI initiatives and investment and all of this? And are you someone that can help them with that? Are you someone that could be net plus? As long as you're transparent, I'm never one to advocate for vaporware products. I'm here to advocate for clear direction and roadmap, a very clear direction that, I'm going to stick with you because you have a place, and you may not have all my functionality I need today, but you're going to bring that in, all good.
Yeah, I think that's always been there, and I think more so than ever, right? If you're sitting in an environment where not only are your customers changing and moving and getting new things, but you in your flow of work, like in your work, you're getting asked to adopt new products, adopt new, AI tools, things like this, get your work more efficient, move faster. Having a leader that creates um, this calmness in a world that is chaotic and fast paced. I think that is just such a skill that if leaders have it and can kind of harness that without slowing anything down, but just this calm voice that says, things are moving. The way we approach it might look different next week, but we are focused, we are clear, we are confident, and we are moving forward in this direction. I just think there's such a skill, and when you see it done well, it just settles everybody down, and they can move through change knowing that like somebody's at the helm and they're confident we're in the right direction.
It's really paradoxical.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Because on the one hand, I'm hearing like, it's really the leader's job to not just navigate change. I mean, navigate change, that's so like 2020. It's the leader's job to keep the ball in motion during constant transformation. So the leader is actively changing and moving the organization towards something. At the same time, what I'm hearing is like the leader needs to be a stabilizer to the people in the organization, right? So how does the leader move and propel the organization through this context of constant change while also grounding people? That's like a real Jedi skill.
I want to add one other word here. Kat used the word, but I would almost juxtapose the calmness for the word I'm thinking of, which is clarity. I think clarity makes everyone more comfortable. I think where organizations struggle is when they're like, squirrels chasing, a different nut every day. That feels super uncomfortable and not calming. But I think clarity drives calmness. And I think that those leaders that commit are also comfortable in recognizing if they commit and they need to pivot, there is less shame in that than ever. Like, you should be rigorous at solving the problem, not about rigorous on staying on the path.
Rigorous about solving the problem, not just staying on the path. I love that, because the path is like, that's really profound. Okay, this is fantastic. So I want us to just as we get towards the end of the hour here, to channel your experiences working with a startup to scale up that is about to go IPO, or really just any kind of inflection point. It could be a private equity investment, it could be a fundraising event, but something that is going to create this discontinuous moment and propel the organization into sort of a new level of growth. What advice, so I'll start with you, Gary. What advice would you give to a founder CEO who is about to embark on that process and is saying, Gary, I got this, we're good, we're solid? What advice would you give that founder CEO?
I think the most dangerous thing for most CEOs is to stop questioning their assumptions. And so they need to be constantly challenging their assumptions. And again, this gets back to all the things we were talking about, the assumptions about what got us here that may not get us there, the assumptions about who on our team are the right people versus not. It's also about our business model and our markets and our solutions. Like I always tell this story about bias and how dangerous it is to organizations. And let's say you had an employee and they're always late to every meeting, and that really bothers you. And you finally are fed up. I'm firing that employee. And now you're going to hire a new employee. And guess what? That employee is goddamn it going to be on time every time. And you hire them. And guess what? They're on time every time. And they can't spell. And so what you've done is traded one issue for a different issue. And you haven't really, thought about like really without all the bias, without all the things that you think made you successful. How do I now navigate this next journey if I don't feel comfortable, empowered, and part of my daily existence to challenge what I believe are my truths?
So constantly scrutinizing and challenging one's assumptions. I think that's incredible. Sage advice, Gary. Thank you. Okay, Kat, you can go with the founder CEO or CHRO or chief talent officer of an organization about to IPO. They say like, we got this, we're fine, it's all good. We're ordering the confetti now. It's going to be amazing. All I need advice on is like, what are we going to have for our appetizers at the post IPO party? What advice would you give to that person?
First, I'd say you need to delegate maybe a little bit more effectively. That doesn't seem like the decision making you should be focusing on at that moment. That might be a separate coaching conversation. I think if you're leading a people team that's scaling rapidly, it might be a little bit boring, but I think it's like go and check out your foundations. Do you know what great looks like in leadership? Do you have a clear, solid, very wide, very deep bench of leaders who are either building to be ready for that sort of executive level job or are ready now and you're sort of like keeping them warm? I think we talked about it a little bit, but attrition is a really big, really big risk when you go through all these changes and all the changes we sort of talked about. And so managing your risk around attrition, particularly at that executive level, that would be my like number one to get after. And just really being clear on sort of who is your succession slate. Don't do one-to-one replacements, but really think about that next leadership bench. I think sort of there's twofold. One is you may lose an executive. You don't really know how any one person is feeling and things are changing. And so being prepared to have somebody to step into that role so that business continuity is there as much as possible, I think is important. And then I also think these executives are about to move into maybe the biggest role of their lives, maybe adding much more complexity to their role in the day-to-day. The CEO, we talked about, is sort of going to go have this different job, if you will. And so if you've got a super strong set of leaders that are there supporting and lifting up that executive group as they step into this new moment, I think, that's huge as well. So, focus on your bench, get your ready now leaders set up and good to go, and then sort of follow on from there.
Excellent advice. So have a sort of a deep talent pipeline. Like, don't just assume that like this all-star team that sits at the C-suite that they're going to be there forever. We need to have good talent at multiple levels, and to be thoughtful about readiness and succession is what I'm hearing. Like that who wants to think about that when we're about to like all become gazillionaires? But like that's actually what we need to be thinking about, creating a really healthy, robust talent pipeline.
Exactly. And I feel like in these moments, because they are so exciting and everybody's like ready for the next thing, that sometimes that can slip away. Like, oh no, our executives are super excited to be here. They've worked so hard to get to this moment. They're going to carry on doing this, be here forever. And actually what we see in the data is sort of the opposite of that. And so that can be, that's sort of the recommendation.
Really, really good advice. Any parting thoughts We covered a lot of ground here, Gary and Kat. Any parting thoughts or other advice that you would give to our listeners who are keen to understand leadership in general, because this is a podcast about leadership, but also specifically in this context of startup to scale up, and how do we mature effectively, right? How do we mature effectively and intentionally?
Kat, start.
Oh, God. Well, one thing that we haven't really, I don't think we've touched on necessarily, so I'll throw it out there as something to think about, and not necessarily, final words of wisdom or anything like that. But I've been thinking a lot about lately how we help founders and executive teams that have been going through a shift from sort of startup to more scale, is how do we help them really trust the experts that they have brought in and put in place around them, with the intention that these are experts in this particular thing. Maybe it's, it could be anything, marketing, accounting, treasury, whatever, legal. But like hiring in experts at senior levels, and then how do you trust them and take their advice and stay curious and know your own limitation in that space. I think it's something that at least in my experience, is sometimes it's so hard for the CEO to say, actually, I don't have an expertise in this area. Maybe I don't know the right sort of decision here. I've hired all these really expensive talent. Let me get them in a room and they can tell us how we move forward. And so there's something here around stay curious, stay humble, and trust your experts. You've paid a lot of money for them. You should be listening to them.
Yeah, I have a similar idea, but a bit of a twist, which is to say you should really try to match your exit to your leadership capability. And the fact that an IPO seems bright and shiny and amazing, and you have this image of yourself ringing the damn bell, like that's amazing, but you may not be that kind of leader. And there's no shame in you saying that my monetization of my business may come through other means which are just as fulfilling, but not maybe the IPO. It's not like the IPO is the only exit. It's not like the IPO is the best exit. Like, you need to really match a little bit, and to, using Kat's word, being humble enough to recognize where your skill set is and what is the exit that's going to match on what you can actually deliver. You need to really be honest in the end about that. Wow.
The great irony, we're talking about IPO, which is this like ecstatic moment. You see, usually, not always, but usually, you see this like big pop in the stock price, and overnight, people become, millionaires, or there's this opportunity to get liquidity and something they worked so hard for. And wow, I imagine that could be something that could go to, one's head quickly. But yet we're ending this podcast about leadership on the topic of humility being, really, really significant, really important. Self-awareness, humility, trust. And so this is fantastic. I think it's the perfect place to stop. And I just want to thank you, Gary and Kat, for taking the time to share your experiential wisdom. So everybody knows you guys are wicked smart and wise, but there's experience in the trenches with these organizations, with these founders and CEOs that you bring to bear, and it's just so valuable for us. So thank you so much, and thank you to all of our listeners. This is a podcast about leadership, and looking forward to our next episode. Bye for now. Thank you.